I was just thinking right before I hit record that I love what I do because I get to talk to people that bring value to the world. And Dr. Travis Parry brings value, and he's going to explain how. And he does it in some similar approaches that I might do, but with a whole different twist. And he even involves the spouse on a lot of this. But he's a number one best-selling author. He's got a couple of books, Achieving Balance, as well as Marry and Grow Rich. He's earned a master's degree in psychology and a PhD in family relations to better understand finances from a psychological and family perspective. And Travis is the founder of Balanced Growth Inc., where he's helped thousands of business owners and couples in all 50 states achieve their financial goals. He's also an international speaker and the podcast host of the Travis Parry Show. However, his greatest accomplishment in life is becoming the husband to his beautiful and talented wife, said by him, not me, for 23 years, which is the exact same as my wife and I. And he's the father to 8 amazing children. That's amazing. 8 kids, and you're making it work. Travis, thanks
Mm.
for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Joel. Really appreciate it.
So tell us about you. You're in northern Utah. Are you from there?
No, originally born and raised in Southern California, and my wife and I met at college here and actually did my PhD at Utah State, where we looked around and said, "This is a beautiful place, absolutely stunning." And we figured out shortly after the PhD how to get back here and set home. We've loved it. We've lived here almost 10 years on and off.
Great. So what's the problem in society that you realize that you're the guy to help address?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So, with I started off as a financial advisor trying to help people with their financial goals. I found very quickly that most business owners who I served, that they and their spouse struggle with really three main things. And that is they didn't actually ever really collaborate on their financials. They struggled with this, and it was very clear. We would always be like, "Hey, who's the decision maker? Is it him? Is it her?" And it was always kind of like we're doing group therapy and couples therapy with people who are coming in. So I said, "Hey, I need to figure out this issue. How can I help couples, especially entrepreneurs who are growing businesses, buying businesses, running businesses, with all this financial stress that they're dealing with? How can I help them and their spouse get on the same page and actually achieve their goals together?" And so I set off to figure that out. Did a master's. That wasn't enough. Did a PhD, and really tested some of the theories that we came up with. Since then, I've developed what we call the balanced growth method, and that method really is focused on what business owners want. They want time freedom and they want financial freedom. They don't want to be chained to a desk. They don't want a 9 to 5. That's why they're entrepreneurs. But because of that, they oftentimes become, kind of chained to this idea, their baby, their dream, and it becomes so obsessive that they become workaholics. And that can drive a big wedge. And so that's why I wrote the first book, Achieving Balance. And then the follow up to Achieving Balance is this book, Marry and Grow Rich, which I talk about how to actually get on the same page, stay on the same page, and grow your business while you're doing it. So
And what's that
that's it.
balance? What is an entrepreneur trying to get balance? And is it possible? Because, I think about, I don't know if I've ever had balance. I worked
Right.
12 hours a day for a lot of years, over a decade, and I built something, and now I hardly work. So
Yeah.
for me, it's been a total imbalance in all ways. But
Yeah.
how do you achieve this balance?
So there are three types of individuals that we've discovered interviewing over now 25, almost 2,600 business owners over the last 5, 6 years. And we found the type ones are, I'm so concerned with not overworking, or so worried about it, right? That they actually don't grow their business. And if you're not growing, we know that in business, you are going backwards. There are a lot of reasons why, but a lot of it is because they were probably out of balance in some point in their life where they were, typical workaholics, 80, 90-hour weeks. Um, and they struggle because it affects your health, it affects your relationships, it affects a lot of things. The second type are entrepreneurs who they are working crazy hours And in their mind, it's okay. I will have more time in the future. I will be able to figure this out later. Unfortunately, there's a large percentage, Joel, that don't ever get that figured out. Okay. So honestly, you are one of the successful ones. you're you're ones that have figured it out. But there are so many we've talked to that have been two, three marriages, that have lost relationship with children. They're overweight, stressed out, and they're successful, quote unquote, on paper, but they just don't have the things that they really, hold on to. So
Yeah,
back to that question about what is balance. Balance is living your life's highest priorities, whatever those are. Typically, it's one of these four: spiritual and health, relationships with marriage and family. A combination of those three or four areas is if men can have that, then they feel a psychological balance. When they don't, there's a cognitive dissonance and imbalance their priorities are and where they're spending time. So my job is to help people align those and they feel balanced. The third type of individual is the one who's figured out how to grow and scale so that they can have more time. But the key is that you make more time. You don't just keep working. Otherwise, you become what I call, a productive workaholic. You're really productive, but you're not reinvesting it in, at the gym or working out or, going on vacations or spending time with your spouse. You just keep reinvesting it back into the business. So though that type three, I've discovered they actually told me the secret is their spouse. The secret has been their spouse.
getting
When they are,
her on board.
oh no, it's both ways. It's she's supportive of the business and he's supportive typically, I'm using a very, male oriented here, and that he is supportive of the family. And the two of them have figured out a great way to work together. I mean, I talk to business partnerships all the time. One's the CEO, one's the COO. They have different areas of expertise that they both own the business. That's how I view marriage. Like, hey, she has her spot, her role, he has his role. Let's not fight about equality. Let's work together on this partnership that we call marriage and make it work. And what I found is when spouses are on the same page, specifically in these three areas: financially, parenting, and religion, those three. When they are on the same page in those three areas, it works, it flows. And the secret is if you can grow and scale your business without you being there. So obviously you figured out a way to do that. If you can grow and scale your business without you physically having to do everything, then you have extra time. And then you can, spend time on the things that matter truly most to you. And when you do that, you can appreciate the systems you have in place and even come back from vacation or from other things with even greater ideas. And the business has grown without you. Those who don't, they don't really have a business. They
Have
they
a job.
have a practice. They have a job. It's the whole E-Myth idea from Michael Gerber. So, that's it, man. It really comes down to, hey, let's grow and scale this thing. If you're going to have a business, you have to grow and scale it. But you don't have to work 120 hours a week. You need
Yeah, forever.
systems, people, and you need your spouse and you to be on board so that you can have that balance.
So, something that I have found that is one of my secrets is that I always lived below my means. It doesn't matter that my business was doing X and making me a lot of money. I didn't increase my lifestyle very much because I realized after years of doing things maybe the wrong way that those things didn't bring me happiness. A new car for me personally doesn't bring me any happiness. Maybe for a month it's cool, and then it just becomes the norm. But now you have a depreciating asset that costs you X amount, the insurance is high, all these things. And for me, a secret was just not spending money, not needing to buy material things. And by doing that, I don't need to make a lot. So if I
Yeah.
make X and it's 10 times more than I need to live on, I can step back and
Yeah.
realize that that's enough. I don't need any more. Is that not common? Guys not
It's
realizing?
not common, although there have been many thought leaders that have said that is the way to live. The Millionaire Next Door, you're probably familiar with that. Stanley and Donko, they're PhDs, and they interviewed, a bunch of millionaires, and they found out the ones who were living below their means were self-made. The ones who weren't were typically, entitled, given to it through trust funds and inheritance and etc. And a lot of times they waste it. They didn't understand. Uh, and what's crazy is he looked back and realized, hey, it's really three generations away. The first generation that come to the country, they work their tail off. The
Mhm.
second generation goes, thanks, mom and dad, for the education. And I see your sacrifice. I'm not going to blow it. But the third generation sees that second generation success and does not remember grandma and grandpa, and if they're even alive, their legacy and what they've left. And this is a struggle. And that's actually what I'm writing my third book about, that concept. How you truly leave a legacy, not just money, but how you leave a spiritual legacy, a relational legacy, even a family history legacy built on your values. How do you give this to the next generation? So balance, growth, and then, leaving a legacy. It's super important. And the more business owners I speak to, the ones that are, getting to that age where legacy is important, 50s, 60s plus, this is what they really care about now. This is what it's
Yeah.
all about. It's all about that legacy.
Years ago when I owned my apparel company, an order came in and I would look at big orders. And this is direct to consumer. So if I saw an order that was like $800 or more, that's interesting. They're buying that much apparel for one shot for them. There's not reselling or anything. And I saw a Vanderbilt last name. And so I
Ooh.
Googled
Mhm,
that person
mhm,
and I
mhm,
started realizing, oh, wow, they're from the Vanderbilts. And whatever happened to the Vanderbilts?
mhm.
And their example was a opposite of the millionaire next door. They
Yes,
blew it on
they blew it.
massive mansions and crazy parties and all this stuff. And then there are examples, and I don't know if this has come up in your research for the new book, but you have like the Rockefellers
That's
who went a
exactly it. Yep.
different approach. They didn't blow the money,
Yes.
they taught the kids. So, what
Mhm.
is that? Let's touch on that because you are
Yeah.
writing about that
Yeah.
and it is a value. How do you teach that future generation to carry the values forward and not blow it on crazy parties and 10 mansions?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is knowing what your values are first. And are you living them? So it's this concept of the balance. The balance really is, are you living your values? Not even your goals and accomplishments, but are you living your values? Are you becoming who God wants you to become? Second, you have to be an example to your children by working together with your spouse, right? If you're married, then you really need to be that solid team. Or how can you expect them to have an example? This is actually what a lot of couples, and a lot of the research I've seen is the reason why they get divorced is that's what their parents did and their spouse's parents. So they just expect to be divorced. This marriage is my first marriage, right? Like this is my first home. And don't get me wrong, there are cases where divorce is absolutely necessary. However, when we come into it with an expectation that this is going to fail, because that whole stat of 50% of marriages end in divorce is actually misleading. 50% of all marriages, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. And the crazy thing is, the more you divorce, the more likelihood you have for divorce. I get on a little bit of a tangent here, but you got to have that example. And you've got to be on the same page so that your children will go, oh, that's how mom and dad did it. And no matter what they read, no matter what their experiences or their friends or whatever they see on social media, although there's an influence, when they go to figure out what to do with their kids, the first thing they're going to think of is, what did mom and dad do?
Mhm.
Oh, and that is the second key. Third key is, okay, so then how do you, once you are successful, you've grown this business, how do you actually transfer assets without upsetting the apple cart? Meaning, how do you not be that third generation in the millionaire next door? One of the things that I talk about a lot on my podcast, it's the Travis Parry show, as we mentioned, is this idea of family banking. We've gotten so used to taking our assets and doing what the government tells us to do. And I'm not saying break the law by any means, but we get used to these are the only options. You got to be creative. What the Rockefellers did, excuse me, what the Vanderbilts did What the Vanderbilts did that the Rockefellers didn't do is actually help to bring those values through family banking. If you do research on this, and there are lots of books on it,
What's family banking?
John Nebeker wrote a book on it. I'll explain. Essentially, you're taking your assets, your funds, and you treat it like a bank. You treat it like its own entity. Oh, well, Travis, trusts do that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I understand. This goes way beyond paper. Because if right now, if you're 65 and you go on a cruise and the ship capsizes and y'all die, it's not ever going to happen. But I use this for an example. If you have a trust, oh great, then you're going to have an executor of the estate, and assets are transfer supposedly, as you outline, as long as it's legal. Well, what happens to the money when it gets to the children or grandchildren? Well, if they're 35 or 25 or 18 or whatever, when they receive a lot of wealth, it can actually totally change them. All the things that you worked for years, decades, and you worked your tail off because you had to, right? Now you've actually created an entitled, spoiled brat. And so, what a family bank does says, hey, if I were to die, this is what I'd like to have happen. And here's a board of directors. Here are people that are going to help you not to blow it. And this is how you can loan from it while I'm alive at really low interest rates to put a down payment on a home or to start a business or to do the things that made me wealthy, but I'm not just going to give it to you. So there's all sorts of ways that parents, grandparents can put these rules in there. But most, again, just care about the legal transfer. They care about the tax implications. And that's why you have financial advisors and lawyers and accountants. But most do not understand and know how to train on the family relational issues that come with money. And that's what a family bank helps to do.
So, do you think that what are your thoughts on inheritance not being necessarily straight even across your kids? So you would have to give
Yes.
12.5% to each of your kids if you
Yeah.
split it among eight of them. But what if one of them wastes all of his or her money and
Yeah.
others are fantastic with their money? How would you approach inheritance that way?
Yeah. So and honestly, that's one thing a family bank can do. It can say, hey, based on previous experience, this is what you're getting or what you're not getting, or this is something that you have to accomplish first. Like, hey, this money can come to you once you complete a degree, or once you work in a job for 10 years, or attach it to something else. The great thing is if you set up your team with the board of directors, think of you like running your own business. Okay. The business entity is still owned, but you have a board of directors that are really running the day to day and they're making decisions. They can approve or not approve things based on how you've outlined it. The best thing I can explain is we do such a good job of kind of writing out the legal and the financial documents to transfer. Yet, if we were to watch all this happen, a lot of us would probably roll over in our graves, thinking, "Oh no, what is this monster created?" So I would absolutely know my children, know my grandchildren. One thing that people end up doing is they say, you know what? I'm not going to worry about it. It's too messy. I don't want to destroy them. So I'm going to give all my money away to charity. I'm going to give it all to my church, all to my, alma mater, whatever. I'm not saying don't be philanthropic. Absolutely do that. But why not help the next generation or two in the times where they need it the most, but teach them. So not only when you pass away, but all throughout your life, help them, teach them by not just giving money away. So I think it starts a lot earlier than when death occurs. I think it happens when they're very young. How are you teaching your kids about money? What are you doing to help them to be self sufficient and add to and give? You talk about value. How are they adding value to society? Or are they just consumers? We are in such a consumer society, right? How can we not just, focus on consuming, but learn to give and learn to be a value to the society around them. Then, if and when a large inheritance comes, they will be more prepared. I say more prepared, not fully prepared, because how do you prepare for receiving an inheritance if you've never received it before? Right?
Never
You and
seen
I,
that kind of money. You know what you
yeah,
mentioned
yeah,
here, you mentioned something that I learned from the book Die with Zero,
yeah. I've heard about
where
that book. Yep.
yeah, where people get inheritance on average at an age of like 60, 60
Right,
plus.
right.
As parents are living longer, you could be easily 65 years old when your parents die. And that's when you
Right.
get your inheritance. But the reality is most people don't need an inheritance at 65
Yes.
years old. They're done themselves, right? So what is a good age? When, I mean, I guess would you make it individual based on each kid? How would you give them money when? And
Yeah.
let's say it's not during a lifetime. Let's say I died tomorrow. When are good ages to give kids money?
Yeah. So, if you think about your own experience as an entrepreneur and business owners and entrepreneurs out there, you know when you needed the money the most, right?
Mhm.
Um, here's the sticky part about this. I have several children, adults who are adults now, and they're serving missions for their church or they're going to college. Um, Part of what we've trained them their entire life is we're not just going to pay for all these things. We're not. If they choose to go on a mission for their church, which is typically a year and a half to 2 years, they're paying for 50% of that. If they pay more than that, great. But we know, hey, you're going to do this, we'll give and you give. We've had similar arrangements with college and paying for rent and other those other things. Even if we can afford it, doesn't mean that there should be this expectation. Okay. That said, if we transform this to, hey, starting a business, when's the best time to get seed money? I don't know. That's probably a very conversation. However, most businesses fail in the first 5 years because of lack of sales or i.e., cash flow. Cash flow is king, right, as you're starting a business. So you kind of have to figure this out. Hey, kid, are you wanting to start a business? Do you want to buy a home in this crazy market? Do you want to go to college? Like, what are their dreams? I would say focus individually on all of your children's goals. What are their values? Know what they want. Sometimes we're so focused on what we as parents want for our children. But what do they want? They're individuals. They come with different personalities and ideas and attitudes. So I have, since they were very little, met with every one of my children since they were two. Like, I know it might sound silly, but I remember talking to my first child on a curb in a parking lot saying, "All right, kid, this is your first interview with dad. Let's talk about life." And it was super basic. But, when they are ready to have these conversations with mom, and now I've involved mom and dad in this conversation, we talk about them and their goals. So, understanding what they want, start the communication now. Ask them what they would desire if you were gone. What would they want versus this idea that everybody just shows up to see what their inheritance is. Let me give an example to this. Before my grandparents passed away, they did sell a property and they were able to liquidate some money and said, "Hey, we're going to do an early inheritance for our children." And my dad knew exactly what he was going to spend it on. He was studying for his pilot's license at the time, and he bought an airplane. Now that sounds like, oh, lavish or whatever, but I mean, this was a Cessna. He went in with three other partners. It wasn't crazy, but it was something that, quite honestly, made a big difference in his life. And he died at age 49. I think he was 46 when he got his license or so. So he had 2 or 3 years that he lived out one of his life's greatest dreams to become a pilot. It wouldn't have happened had my grandparents decided to hang on to it. They didn't know that their kid was going to die before them, right? It's something that as parents you never dream of. But I throw that out there as an example of knowing what your children want and helping them to achieve it, but doing it with responsibility, doing it with understanding that there's skin in the game for them as well, so they don't feel like everything's handed to them. Otherwise, yeah, they become those families that can't hang on to their wealth.
And you help entrepreneurs, business owners to achieve this life balance, which is a better quality of life. You told me before we started recording that the success rate increases when the wife is involved, right? When the spouse is involved in this thing, what happens? Why is that the case?
It's huge, huge. In fact, because I was a financial advisor looking at why do people argue about money? That was my main thing. Like I saw so many couples, they would not make decisions together. And we laugh about it all the time, like, oh, we're doing therapy, as I mentioned. But none of us were trained. So it's like, I want to at least understand. That's why I did my master's in psychology, and it wasn't enough. But as I started to piece these things apart, I'm like, okay, now I know why they fight. They fight about money because of communication. Communication between men and women are so different, right? So let's teach them how to communicate. But further than that is that men and women have fundamentally different views about money. Period. Their values are different. Men are more risk takers in general. Women want stability. They want to be provided for. That is an innate feeling. And yes, are there boss babes out there? And I'm not discriminating against people who want to go get it. That's fine. But for most individuals, especially as we look at money, there are fundamental differences. Involved in that also is their upbringing. So now they've got how their parents handled money, and now their in-laws' parents, how did they handle money? Because that influences the couple. So I said, gee, it's communication, it's values, it's psychology. So how do couples do this well? What are the examples out there? Couples that are doing this well. And I researched them and found them. And we found that when couples have the same values around money, it doesn't have to be exact, but it can be an overlap. I call them your shared goals and values. When their financial shared goals and values are, those are aligned up, when they have that, basically being on the same page, then whatever comes their way, whatever challenges, whatever goals they set, they will overcome those challenges and they'll be able to achieve those goals far more efficient, much more successful than those couples that don't have that figured out.
And is that luck of the draw, or do you have a process to get them to those shared goals and values?
Yeah, I have a process, and it's actually outlined in the second book, Marry and Grow Rich. And it's really the key, and this is why I called it Marry and Grow Rich. We've got Think and Grow Rich. Thank you,
Mhm.
Napoleon Hill. It was really a rewrite of his first book, Laws of Success, which I've read and I've enjoyed. The crazy thing is, the more I researched Napoleon, I found out that while he wrote Think and Grow Rich, he got a divorce, and he was living with his I can't remember if his son or if his daughter. Anyway, the family he was living with, they got a divorce while he was living there. I don't know all the details. I just know that sometimes when we so much focus on ourself around money, we very much become these closed, very self-interested individuals. But we can understand that money is really a stewardship. It's temporary. We don't die with it, right? Nobody can. But it's temporary. Therefore, this stewardship, this temporary ownership, is something that we're still responsible for. And that as couples, I think it's a spiritual responsibility. I really do. And that the two of you can join together. It's messy, but the process, I believe, is really simple. You look at your money history together. What have you thought about money? What are your ideas about it? What are your values? And then you look at how you overlap. Where are your strengths together? You focus on that. That doesn't mean you don't look at the weaknesses and say, hey, how can we improve? But I believe in focusing on strengths based. Okay. That has been the key for so many couples that have made it. Then you can go back and say, yeah, these are the areas we need to improve. If all you did was no offense to Dave Ramsey out there and Dave Ramseyites, but if all you did is just focus on your debt, quite honestly, psychology shows us if that's what you focus on, that's what you're going to attract. And even if like I want to get out of debt, if that's all you focus on, then you're just back to zero and you've not really accumulated anything. Robert Kiyosaki talked, he just said the other day, I'm $1.2 billion in debt, but it's good debt because I have income producing properties that are producing, hundreds of billions of income throughout the year, something like that. And I tend to think of the same, like, yes, I understand there are some differences. There are going to be some spots where you just rub, and you guys are probably never going to agree on that. But focus on where you do agree. Because if you can make it work now with the business and you're running your own household, then you can help your kids. You put on the oxygen mask first, and then you teach your children about money. And quite honestly, they're not going to remember a lot of what you say. They're going to remember what you did with them. Did you help them set up a bank account? Did you help them pay for their first car? Did you help them go to college? If so, how? Like, what did you do? What did you teach them? Did you teach them about the value of money, that it's a stewardship and they should have a good relationship with money? A lot of people, even very successful individuals, have a very horrible relationship psychologically with money. So they may have a lot, but they burn through it because they don't
Yeah.
like it. It's
I,
weird.
s- I see that all the time. And I've
I bet.
asked people if their parents talk to them about money, and they say, no, it's kind of taboo. Man, at our table, we talked not with
Yep.
strangers, but my dad, my mom, my brother, and I, we talked about politics, current events, money, religion. We talked about all of these things, and it's
Yes.
as little
Yes.
kids how we learned. But I realize that people will have issues with money, and then they'll say, "Well, we don't want the kids to find out." I knew when my parents were worried about money, and they taught me
Right.
about real life by me hearing about that.
Yep.
I don't think
Yep.
there's a problem with that. It's funny you
No.
mentioned Napoleon Hill going through a divorce while he was writing Think and Grow Rich. Very hard to grow rich when you're going through a divorce. In the other book that you mentioned, Millionaire Next Door, they make a note of that. That it's
Yes.
very important to stay married, stay
That's it.
happily married to
One of
build
the best
wealth.
things you can do. One of the best things financially. But obviously, I believe that marriage is again, a stewardship as well. Like, I believe that I will be judged someday of how I treated my wife and my children. And I want there to be no doubt that I loved them and cared about them. Because again, we talk about legacy, but Joel, like we start talking about money, which is fun to talk about. And it's interesting. But what about that legacy of relationships? Not only do married men do better because they're motivated, right? Not only do married men with children have more to live for, they will die for those humans. It's unheard of. Like, how many other things would you die for? Very, very few things. But your family, you will die for them. So there is something psychologically, and I tend to believe this, but there are psychologists out there who believe that men aren't really men until they have a child, because something happens in that brain, and it starts to say, I've got to protect this. I have to earn for this. I have to love this creature, and it changes your heart. It just does. And anyone that's had a child, every single time, and I think we have 8 children, but every single time has changed me. Every time. And I'm a better person because of it. That said, what are we doing? How are we creating relationships that will create lasting legacy? Yes, money can be a vehicle and it can be a reason why we talk about things, but it better not be the only thing you talk about. Like, I agree, money is very taboo in our society. Most people should talk about it more. But my big thing is spend time with your children. So I do daddy dates. Once a month, I take each one of them and I do something they like to do. And I will go rock climbing. I will go to the park with my little ones or go to eat with my foodie. I'll do the things they enjoy doing. I will spend time with them. If you invest your time, as Stephen Covey says, like more and more deposits, if there are withdrawals that are needed, it will come so much better. They will appreciate when you correct them. But if that's all you did, then they're not going to really understand, not going to really have a relationship with you. So, money, yeah, it's important, but relationships. What about the spiritual legacy? What are you teaching them about their connection with God, who God is, and what their place is in society? And are you teaching your stories about your family, the historical side? Are you talking to them about grandma and grandpa? So, last example here. My dad passed away 20 years ago now, and a family member made a book of remembrance about him. And the other day, it was that 20-year anniversary, and I had one of my kids say, "Who is Grandpa?" It's like, oh, I tell you stories, but let me show you some pictures. I got that book down, just went through pictures, went through memories, talked to him about who Dad was. I think I was there an hour.
Mm.
And I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I love my dad. I had a great relationship with him. But to then connect My children with their grandpa, who they will not see in life, and firmly believe they will see him later, and they probably knew him before. But I know that connecting them to their heritage helps them know who they are.
Mm.
They need that in a world today that wants to tear them down about everything, everything. They need to know who they are. So I think that legacy is, yes, it's financial, but it's spiritual, it's relational, and it is connected with your family history.
I think about ancestors I never met and what they probably struggled through because life was a lot harder 100 years ago, 200, 500, 1,000 years ago. And so whenever I'm in a tough situation, I'm stressed out, I'm physically worn out, but I want to finish this workout. I think this is nothing. I'm in an air-conditioned room
Right.
lifting weights or training jujitsu. I'm not going to die. These guys were farming and working
Yeah.
really hard with no technology and nothing to make their life easier. So I think it is good to connect to the past. You mentioned about those dates with the kids. I encourage people to do that. I stole that idea from Jim Shields. I think it's a family board meeting, I think is the book. I have it actually back there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. His example was a child that was giving them problems in school. And as soon as he dedicated a day a month with that kid, a few hours to do what that kid wanted to do and talk about what that kid wanted to talk about, everything changed.
Yep.
Behavior at school, grades, behavior at school, at home. I mean, everything in that kid's life got better. So it's
Yeah.
extremely important. So someone comes to you
Love it.
because they're an entrepreneur
Yeah.
and they want a better life. They want better guidance. Tell me that process, how you get them in, the
Sure.
intake process, you bring them in with their wife, and then
Yeah.
what is the process in the end and what's the solution? What do you
All
help them
right.
accomplish?
We've been talking money and goals and values and all these great things, but I tell you one thing we haven't talked about. And my very first conversations that I have with any man about their business and life is tell me about your business, tell me about your family. I find out almost all I need to know right there. I find out what they're stressed about. I find out what they're worried about on their family front. And the next thing I do is I have a conversation with them about their own psychological self-limiting doubts and beliefs. And I got into this in my psychological masters a little bit, but I have done training after training after training with so many different mentors, and I have some of my own limiting beliefs I'm still working through. But we're all human. But the process is that most of us, whether we're beginning the business and we're overworked, whether we are growing and scaling our business, but we're struggling to, really make time for marriage and family, or we're at the pinnacle and everything's super successful. And now we're trying to figure out how do we transfer this legacy to the next generations. Doesn't matter. Whichever phase that you're at, I have found the number one thing is that we still have some kind of limiting belief or block, typically around money. This is it. And this is why I changed from a financial advisor to more of a psychological, I call myself a family phenologist, okay? A phenologist is really someone who works with all these psychological things around money. Um, how we think about it, what our belief systems are. Now, well, Travis, I'm already successful, then why would I need your help? And it's because those things are subconscious. And a lot of times these fears have driven us short term over and over and over again. We're actually addicted to this fear based motivation. And even though we've achieved great success, I know so many who are there, but are still totally concerned. The CEO of NVIDIA just last week put out an article, somebody put out an article on him that said he worries every single day that his business will go bankrupt.
Mm.
This is the CEO of one of the most successful companies in the world, but every day. So he works 7 days a week. He's over 100 hours a week easily. He checks his email at 4 a.m. and he works all day nonstop. Okay. I could give you example. Elon Musk, very similar example of very successful, individuals who we tend to look to like, well, what are they doing? Let's copy that. Right. I'm telling you right now, some of these really hyper successful individuals still have these psychological subconscious
And
limiting
we think
doubts.
they've got it all figured out. Look at all
That's
the
it.
success they have. They must have
That's
no
it.
fear. Their day, they must wake up and everything's just perfect and it all goes according to plan. So what are the so limiting beliefs? You said
Yeah.
they come from a fear a lot of times around success or failure, and we tie that to money because money
Yes.
is if you have a lot of it, you usually are a winner. If you don't have, then you're a failure. But what are some of the ways to work on these limiting
Yeah.
beliefs? I
Yeah.
I like to think, there's I always say that there are these dream boards where you put things that would be an amazing life. The only problem with that, until you accomplish them, you're looking at the what you haven't gained. I like the opposite. I look at the home I grew up in, I was born in third world communist Cuba. And when
Oh
I
man.
look at that picture, which is on my computer, I could see it and I go, oh man, I've come a long way. I live in the United States. I have a home that's not there. I have freedom. I can do whatever I want. And to
Yeah.
me, that gives me great joy. But I
Yeah.
think we're always missing the mark because we're trying to get to something else. So,
Yes.
how do we work on these self beliefs?
So what I do, and part of my process, is I spend a good 90 minutes and I will drill down. I do something that is referred to as mind mapping. Okay. So, Joel, if I was to say red and you were to say the first thing you thought of, you might think of ambulance. If I said ambulance, you'd say, firefighter, beach, yacht. What we do this long enough and you've come up with something that it totally has nothing to do with red. Does that make sense? But what happens is I can then kind of see where your brain is going, what you're thinking. I do something very similar. I don't have all the time to explain this, but essentially what it is I try to map where your limiting beliefs are coming from. And there's really two main areas: fear of failure, meaning I don't want to try it because I'm going to fail and therefore I'm going to end up worse than where I am now. So I'm going to stop. Those are type oneers. Okay. That's where most of them are stuck, is fear of failure. There's also fear of success. Well, isn't that an oxymoron? Well, that's what cognitive dissonance is. Okay. Your consciousness thinks I'm successful, but your subconscious says, I'm afraid of being more successful than I am because maybe my friends won't like me, or maybe I'll have to pay more taxes, or insert anything that has to do with being successful. So, what do? We self sabotage every single day. Whether you have fear of failure or fear of success, we self sabotage. We are the ones who are actually in our own way. And it doesn't matter. Again, if you're building a business and you don't have balance, you're growing and scaling, or you've achieved success and you want to teach that next gen, a lot of us will say, well, I'm afraid of something. I can't grow my business because I won't have time for my family, blah, 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 blah. I can't teach my children because I wasn't the best example, when they were in my home. Baloney. That's just your fear. That's your subconscious fear. But most of us don't think like that. We're thinking in the conscious mind. However, when we go to execute and we go to take action, we vacillate and we stop. We overanalyze. We won't do something because it's not going to be perfect how we thought it would be. So we don't try. And I can tell you that is the thing that I've seen across the board. Every single um, client I've ever coached has had very much a big fear of failure, a fear of success, or in some cases, both. And so I walk through a system of three different systems. I believe that, do no harm, the Hippocratic oath for doctors. I believe in the same thing. So I'm not going to do the really deep rooted psychological, system if it's not needed. So I start off with kind of the A and then the B and then the C solution. And it's incredible. I've seen business owners who are stuck at 200,000 a year blow into 500. I've seen business owners who were afraid to leave their business and they're running a $1 billion enterprise and they won't spend time doing the things they know they should. It doesn't matter how much money you make if you're just starting out or someplace in the middle. The self-limiting beliefs are the things that are keeping you stuck.
That's interesting. You said vacillation. It's just same as procrastination, right? You
Yep.
pause, you don't work, then it
Yep.
all boils down to as simple as fear and then of those self-limiting beliefs. So many people I think can relate to that. So if somebody wants to buy your book, obviously they could look up Achieving Balance, Marry and Grow Rich, and eventually you'll have that third one coming out. But if they want to talk to you and see what it might look like to work with you, how do they get a hold of you? What do they do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can always email me, Travis at travisperry with an A.com. You can go to my website, travisperry.com, my podcast and everything to get to know me. There is an application on that front page, and there's a whole bunch of testimonials. Not to take my word for it, it works. The system, the balanced growth method, absolutely works, even for people who think they're doing really well. And quite honestly, this is the problem with the subconscious again, Joel, is it tends to keep us safe. It keeps us from, quote unquote safe. So we don't think that we need to improve. But when we have a coach, I've always had a coach. I will always have a coach or a mentor paid, so that I can be accountable to them. Because when I do, I have found that I improve. They see things that I can't. They can't get into my subconscious. They can't see the things that I said I'm going to do and I didn't do them. But when you have mentorship like that, it's super helpful. So yeah, right on that front page, great. Yeah, you can buy Achieving Balance or Marry and Grow Rich on Amazon. I've got it on Kindle and Audible and stuff. But if you want a better deal, go to my website. Both of the books there for $5. You can get the audio, the ebook, all the stuff included, depending on what's going on there on the website. But yeah, go there, grab it, and then if you're like, hey, I need this right now, email me, or you can fill out the form online, schedule a call with my team, and we will go from there.
Right, travisparry.com. And that's Parry. Travis, thank you for this conversation. You've opened some thoughts for me personally, and I'm sure for many
Thanks,
as
Joel.
well.
Absolutely
Thanks for being here
appreciate
with
it.
me.
Thanks. Thank you.